I stood ankle-deep in freezing mud at my 9-year-old son's grave, the rain so heavy it felt like the sky was physically collapsing on top of me. No mother, no father, no sister. Just me, a soaked black dress, and a small box of ashes that felt impossibly light. I told myself the storm had kept them away. I told myself the flooded roads were impassable. I was wrong. Across town, safe, dry, and warm, my family was toasting with champagne. They were celebrating the $1.15 million malpractice settlement they planned to use for my sister's dream retreat. They thought I was drowning in grief. They did not know I had learned to swim in the dark. And as I stared at the photo my sister had foolishly posted, smiles, crystal flutes, and greed, I realized something. My son's death was not a tragedy to them, it was a payday. Before we step into the storm, I need to know who I'm talking to. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I read every single one. The house smelled like wet wood and abandonment. It was a Victorian shell I had bought 6 months ago, intending to restore it room by room, a project to keep my hands busy while my son Noah spent his final days in and out of the hospital. Now it just felt like a tomb made of sawdust and half-painted walls. I locked the door against the storm, shivering in my soaked dress. I had not even kicked off my muddy shoes when my phone on the kitchen counter lit up. Then it buzzed. Then it lit up again, a constant frantic strobing in the dim light. I walked over and looked down at the screen. It was my sister Brittany, then my mother, Deborah. A normal person might expect apologies. A normal family would be sending texts filled with regret about the weather or car trouble or whatever excuse they had concocted for leaving me alone at the cemetery. But I did not come from a normal family. I came from a transactional one. Brittany's text read, "Did you take your sedative today? Mom is really worried you're spiraling." 2 seconds later, my mother's message popped up, "Maya, please answer. We need to know you're lucid. Grief can make people imagine terrible things." I stared at the words, letting the cold logic of it sink in. They were not checking on me, they were building a case. Sedative, spiraling, lucid, imagine. These were legal buzzwords. They were creating a digital paper trail to prove that I was unstable, medicated, and unreliable. If I replied with anger, I would look manic. If I replied with sadness, I would look depressive. If I did not reply at all, I would look catatonic. They wanted a reaction. They wanted an explosion they could screenshot and show to a judge. I did not throw the phone. I did not scream into the void. I did not type out a paragraph of rage detailing how they had abandoned me. Instead, I initiated what psychologists call the gray rock method. To a narcissist, your emotion is fuel. Your anger, your tears, your defense, it is all supply. It validates their power over you. But a gray rock offers nothing. It is dull, impenetrable, and uninteresting. You make yourself so boring, so unresponsive that they have to look elsewhere for their drama. Or better yet, they get so frustrated by your silence that they get loud. I set the phone down unanswered. I walked into the dining room where my work laptop sat on a stack of drywall sheets. I opened it, the screen glowing blue in the dark room. My family shared everything digitally. It was how my father Gary kept control over us, shared passwords, shared clouds, shared locations. For years I had hated the lack of privacy. Tonight it was my weapon. I logged into the family cloud account. I knew Brittany would not have changed the password. She was too lazy to update her devices. I navigated to the shared calendar. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange icy calm, the kind that comes when you finally stop trying to solve a puzzle and just look at the picture. I clicked on today's date. They're blocked out from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. The exact hours I was lowering my son into the frozen ground was a calendar entry. It did not say funeral. It did not say family emergency. It did not say traffic. It read in my father's rigid all-caps typing asset allocation meeting. They had not missed the funeral by accident. They had scheduled around it. They had blocked off the time to discuss how to divide up the $1.15 million before the dirt was even settled on Noah's coffin. I looked at the entry, then at my phone, which was still buzzing with their fake concern. I did not cry. I simply opened the voice memo app on my laptop, set it to record, and placed my phone right next to the microphone. Let them talk. I was ready to listen. To understand the cruelty of that calendar entry, you have to understand the economy of my family. I do not mean money, though that was part of it. I mean the economy of emotional debt. For the last 3 years, while Noah was fighting a losing war against his own kidneys, I lived in a chair next to a hospital bed. I learned the rhythm of dialysis machines the way other mothers learn nursery rhymes. And to pay the mountain of bills that insurance refused to cover, I worked. I am a medical illustrator. I draw trauma. I sketch the precise, gory details of surgical procedures and anatomical failures for textbooks and malpractice suits. I spent thousands of hours shading the cross-sections of failing hearts and collapsed lungs, turning tragedy into technical diagrams just to keep the lights on. My sister Brittany had a different job. She was a lifestyle architect. While I was sleeping in waiting rooms that smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee, Brittany was building a brand on Instagram based on manifesting abundance and clean living. She posted photos of her green juices while I was forcing potassium-binding powder into my dying son's applesauce. My parents, Gary and Deborah, did not just enable her, they worshipped her. She was the light, I was the shadow. She was the success, I was the struggle. In sociology, there is a concept known as the scapegoat mechanism. It suggests that a toxic family system is like a pressurized engine. It cannot function without a place to dump its toxic waste, its shame, its failures, its insecurities. For 32 years, I thought I was just the black sheep. Sitting there in the dark, staring at the calendar, I realized I was something far more utilitarian. I was the vessel. They poured their disappointment into me so they could remain pristine. If I was the mess, Brittany could be the miracle. If I was the chaotic, grieving, struggling single mother, my parents could feel like saints for occasionally tossing me a crumb of pity. My suffering was the glue that held their self-image together. But then the settlement happened. $1.15 million. It was not a lottery win. It was not a gift. It was a settlement from the hospital, admitting that a resident's error had shortened my son's life by 2 years. Every cent of that money was paid for by Noah's pain. It was blood money in the most literal sense. To me, that money was a heavy, sacred burden. It was supposed to clear the medical debts and then go into a foundation in his name. But to my family, to Brittany, they did not see blood money. They saw capital. They saw the seed funding for Brittany's long-dreamed of holistic wellness retreat. They had convinced themselves that Noah would have wanted his death to fund Brittany's dream. They had rewritten the narrative so completely that stealing from a dead child did not feel like theft. It felt like divine intervention. The problem was me. As long as I was the struggling scapegoat, the system worked. But a scapegoat with $1.15 million is no longer a victim. She is a threat. If I had that money, I did not need them. I did not need their conditional love or their suffocating pity. That is why they were panicked. That is why they were texting me about sanity and spiraling. They were not afraid I was losing my mind. They were afraid I was gaining my independence. And they were right to be afraid. Because the daughter who accepted the scraps was buried in the mud with her son. The woman sitting at the laptop was someone else entirely. The next morning, the rain finally stopped, but the sky remained a bruised purple. I was sanding the drywall in the hallway. The rhythmic shh of the sandpaper was the only sound I could tolerate when a car door slammed outside. I did not need to look out the window. I knew the sound of my father's SUV door. It always closed with a heavy, authoritative thud. I did not hide. I did not stop sanding. I was covered in white dust, looking like a ghost in my own home when the front door swung open without a knock. They poured into the hallway like a sludge. My father, Gary, led the way, his face set in a grim mask of paternal burden. My mother, Deborah, was already dabbing her eyes with a tissue, though they were dry. And bringing up the rear was Brittany, phone in hand, holding it casually at chest height. She was not texting. The camera lens was pointed directly at me. "Oh, Maya," my mother choked out, rushing forward but stopping short of hugging me. She gestured vaguely at the dust, the unfinished walls, the bare floors. "Look at this. Look at how you're living. It's worse than we feared." "I am renovating, Mom," I said. My voice was raspy from disuse. "It is a construction site, not a breakdown." "Sweetie," Brittany said, her voice dripping with that rehearsed influencer empathy. "We are not here to judge. We are here because we love you. We are here for an intervention." Intervention. The word hung in the dusty air. "We have been talking," my father said, stepping forward, blocking the light from the doorway. "You are not processing this, Maya. The texts, the isolation, missing your own family at the afterwards." He could not even say the word funeral. "You are clearly unwell." "I was at the funeral, Dad," I said, sanding a rough patch on the wall. "See," Brittany whispered loudly to the camera. "Paranoid delusions. She thinks we were at a meeting." My mother let out a sob that sounded like a hiccup. We were trying to find you, baby. We drove around for hours. You are confused. You are grieving. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick blue folder. We cannot let you make decisions right now. You are too fragile. You promised us, remember, before Noah passed. You said you wanted Brittany to handle the administrative side of things so you could heal. Gaslighting is a specific kind of violence. It attempts to overwrite your reality with someone else's fiction. I knew I had never said that. I knew they were lying. But standing there exhausted, hungry, and grieving, a tiny sliver of doubt tried to wiggle into my brain. Did I say that? Was I that tired? But then I looked at Brittany's phone. The red recording dot was blinking. They were staging a scene. This was not a conversation. It was content. It was evidence. I did not promise anything, I said, keeping my voice flat, devoid of the rising panic in my chest. And I do not need help managing my son's estate. My father's face hardened. The mask of concern slipped, revealing the bully underneath. This is not a request, Maya. You are living in filth. You look like a skeleton. You are clearly mentally incapacitated. If you do not sign these temporary management papers voluntarily, we will have to take steps to protect you from yourself. Ideally, we handle this as a family, Brittany added, stepping closer, the phone lens feeling like the barrel of a gun. So the money does not get tied up in court for years. Noah would not want that. He would want his legacy to start now. There it was. The threat wrapped in a shroud. Sign the papers or we declare you insane and take it anyway. I looked at the blue folder in my mother's shaking hand. I looked at my father's clenched jaw. I looked at the red dot on Brittany's phone. I realized then that gray rock was not enough. You can be a rock, but if they have a sledgehammer, they will still crush you. I needed to be something else. Leave the papers, I said quietly. I will read them. You will sign them, my father corrected. By tomorrow. They left the folder on a sawhorse. As they filed out, Brittany lingered for a second, panning the camera one last time around the dusty, empty room. So sad, she whispered to her followers. But we are going to save her. The door clicked shut. I waited until I heard the engine fade away. Then I picked up the blue folder. I did not read it. I did not need to. I grabbed my keys, walked out into the gray afternoon, and drove straight to the city. I was done being a rock. It was time to be a shark. Arthur Vance's office did not look like a law firm. It looked like a scalpel. While my father's lawyer, Simon Krell, worked out of a beige strip mall that smelled of damp carpet and desperation, Vance operated from the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown. The walls were floor-to-ceiling windows. There were no shadows here. No dark corners for secrets to hide. It was the glass fortress, the exact opposite of the suffocating opacity of my family. I sat across from him at a desk that cost more than my car. I did not waste time with small talk. I slid the blue folder across the polished obsidian surface. Then I placed my phone on top of it. They came to my house an hour ago, I said, my voice steady. They tried to force me to sign these, and I have recordings of them admitting that the money is for a wellness retreat, not my son's estate. Vance did not touch the folder yet. He looked at me with eyes that were terrifyingly intelligent. He was an estate litigator, but in legal circles he was known as a shark who eats other sharks. You did not sign, he asked. Good, because if you had, you would not be a client. You would be a ward of the state. He opened the folder. He did not read it like a normal person. He scanned it like a machine processing data. A muscle in his jaw ticked once. That was the only sign of emotion he gave. He spun a monitor around to face me. Maya, your parents did not just ask you to sign a management agreement, Vance said, his voice dropping an octave. They filed a motion with the probate court at 9 a.m. this morning, before they even showed up at your door. I looked at the screen. The legal jargon swam before my eyes until Vance pointed to the header. Ex parte petition for emergency conservatorship. The air left the room. Conservatorship, I whispered. For people who cannot feed, clothe, or shelter themselves, Vance corrected. They are claiming that your grief has triggered a psychotic break. They have affidavits from your mother and sister stating you are hallucinating, living in squalor, and are a danger to the estate's assets. If a judge grants this, you do not just lose the money. You lose your right to drive. You lose your right to vote. You lose the right to choose where you sleep. I felt cold. Not the cold of the rain or the mud, but the absolute zero of betrayal. They were not just trying to steal from me. They were trying to erase me. They were willing to strip me of my personhood to make me a legal non-entity just to get their hands on Brittany's startup capital. They want a war, I said, looking up at the city skyline. So let us fight. No, Vance said sharply. We do not fight. Fighting implies they have a valid position. Fighting gets messy and expensive. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. We do not fight them, Maya. We trap them. He pulled a thick leather-bound book from his shelf and opened it to a marked page. The trust established by the hospital settlement has a standard protection clause usually ignored. It is called predatory intent. It was designed to protect beneficiaries from scams, but the language is broad. It states that any party attempting to defraud the beneficiary through coercion or fabrication forfeits any legal claim to the estate permanently. But we have to prove fraud, I said. It is their word against mine. Exactly, Vance smiled, and it was not a nice smile. That is why we do not stop the hearing. We do not block their motion. We invite them to mediation. We let them bring their evidence. We let them speak. We let them get comfortable. He tapped the blue folder. The law is not a shield, Maya. It is a trap door. We are going to let them walk right into the middle of the room thinking they own the place. We are going to let them lie under oath, and once they are on the record— He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. I looked at the glass walls. I looked at the city below, tiny and insignificant. I thought of Noah, who never got a chance to grow up because of a mistake. My family wanted to make another mistake. Set the meeting, I said. Let them come. 2 days later, we sat in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and expensive tension. This was not the court hearing yet. This was the pre-mediation discovery, the moment where both sides lay their cards on the table to see if a settlement can be reached before a judge gets involved. My family was not there, just their lawyer, Simon Krell. He looked exactly like his office, smelled damp and opportunistic. He wore a suit that was slightly too shiny and a smile that did not reach his eyes. We do not want to hurt Maya, Krell said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the mahogany table toward Vance. But this is undeniable proof of her state of mind. If this goes to a judge, she will be institutionalized. We are offering her a way out. Sign the conservatorship, and we keep this private. Vance did not pick up the paper. He nodded for me to look at it. I leaned forward. It was a printout of a digital journal entry. The font was the default setting on my writing app. The date at the top was 3 weeks ago, 2 days before Noah died. I read the words, and my blood turned to ice. The voices are getting louder today. Noah is whispering to me from the machines. He says he does not want the money. He says it is dirty. He says I need to give it to Brittany so she can clean it. If I do not give it to her, the bad things will not stop. I have to listen to the voices. I stared at the paper. The syntax was mine. The spacing was mine. It sounded exactly like a nightmare I might have had, but I had never written it. I had never typed those words. Where did you get this? I whispered, my voice trembling. Brittany found it on your laptop when she came to check on you, Krell said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. She was looking for your insurance info and saw the file open. She printed it because she was scared for you, Maya. Hearing voices, command hallucinations, that is a textbook psychotic break. I looked at Vance, panic rising in my throat like bile. I did not write this. But Brittany has my old passwords. She used my laptop when I was at the hospital. She must have logged in remotely. It is dated 3 weeks ago, Maya Krell interrupted, tapping the date stamp on the printout. You cannot fake a timestamp. I felt the walls closing in. It was perfect. It was damning. A grieving mother hearing voices commanding her to give the money to the golden child. It fit their narrative perfectly. Then Arthur Vance laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound like a twig snapping. Mr. Krell, Vance said, finally picking up the paper. You are holding a printout. A static image of text. It is a physical representation of a digital file. It is evidence, Krell snapped. It is a ghost story, Vance corrected. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with something dangerous. Maya, do you use the cloud-based version of the app? Yes, I said. Vance turned back to Krell. Here is the thing about the cloud, Simon. It never forgets. You see, when you print a document, it shows you the text. But the back end, the metadata, that shows you the life of the document. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. It is called version history. Every keystroke is logged. Every edit is time-stamped by the server, not the user's computer clock. You can change the date on a Word doc, sure, But you cannot change the audit trail on the server. Vance tossed the paper back. It slid across the table and stopped right at Krell's edge. Your client thinks she is a writer, Vance said. But she forgot she was writing on a crime scene. Krell's smug smile faltered. For the first time he looked at the paper not as a weapon but as a bomb. We will see you at the full mediation tomorrow, Vance said, standing up. Bring the family. And tell Brittany to bring her laptop. We are going to need it. We walked out of the room. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline. They had tried to frame me with a ghost story. But ghosts leave footprints if you know where to look, and we were about to shine a spotlight on every single step they took. The storm had returned with a vengeance. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, turning the city outside into a blurred watercolor of gray and steel. Inside, the atmosphere was perfectly climate-controlled, but the pressure was climbing. My family sat on one side of the long mahogany table. My mother, Deborah, dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. My father, Gary, sat with his arms crossed, radiating the indignant authority of a man waiting for an apology. Brittany sat in the middle, scrolling on her phone under the table, looking bored. Their lawyer, Simon Krell, slid a document toward us. We believe this is a generous compromise, Krell said, his smile oily. In light of Maya's condition, the family is willing to manage the trust. We will grant Maya a monthly allowance of 40% of the interest provided she adheres to a strict wellness plan supervised by Brittany. 40% of my own son's blood money, conditioned on my obedience. I looked at Arthur Vance. He did not blink. He did not look at the document. He looked at Brittany. Before we discuss numbers, Vance said, his voice soft and dangerous, we need to authenticate the evidence you submitted yesterday, the diary entry. Brittany sighed, putting her phone down. She looked at me with sad, practiced eyes. I really did not want to use that, Maya. It broke my heart reading it. Hearing you talk about the voices, it terrified me. So you confirm, Vance pressed, that you found this file on Maya's laptop 3 weeks ago, dated 2 days before Noah passed? Yes, Brittany said. I printed it immediately. I knew we might need it to get her help. You are willing to swear to that? Absolutely. Vance nodded. He reached for a remote control on the table. Lights, please. The room dimmed. A projector screen descended from the ceiling with a mechanical whir. My family looked confused. Krell looked nervous. The beautiful thing about the cloud, Vance said, his voice filling the room, is that it does not care about your story. It only cares about data. A spreadsheet appeared on the giant screen. It was a digital audit trail. This is the metadata for the file, titled Journal Entry Final. Doc, Vance narrated using a laser pointer to circle the top line. Mr. Krell, could you read the date created timestamp? Krell squinted. He stopped breathing. Yesterday, Vance read for him. 4:12 p.m. Brittany froze. And the IP address, Vance continued, moving the laser dot. It does not match Maya's home. It matches a commercial connection registered to the Soul Space studio. He turned to Brittany. You did not find this file 3 weeks ago, Brittany. You wrote it yesterday afternoon. In your office. We can even see the edit history. You spent 45 minutes deleting the words "I want" and replacing them with "the voices say" to make it sound more psychotic. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than the storm outside. This is forgery, Vance said, his voice turning to steel. It is perjury. He slapped a thick document onto the table. And this, Vance said, is the trust agreement, specifically Article 9, Section C, the predatory intent clause. It states that any party who attempts to defraud the beneficiary or the estate automatically forfeits any and all future claims to the assets. By forging this document to seize control, you have legally disinherited yourselves. That is not. You cannot. Krell stammered, shoving his papers into his briefcase. It is done, Vance said. The petition for conservatorship is dead, the money is locked, and I will be forwarding this audit trail to the district attorney. My mother stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. The fake tears were gone. Real panic replaced them. Maya, please, she begged, reaching across the table. It was Brittany. She told us it was real. We are your family. We were just trying to help. Help, I asked. My voice was not loud. It was the only steady thing in the room. I looked at Brittany. She was pale, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She realized the money was gone, the retreat was gone, the narrative was gone. You did not write a diary entry, Brit, I said, standing up and picking up my purse. You wrote a confession. I walked to the door. I did not look back. I did not need to see the wreckage. I had the receipt. The storm did not stop for 3 days, but for the first time in years the house felt warm. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. Arthur Vance did not just threaten to go to the district attorney. He hand-delivered the file. Brittany was charged with attempted fraud and forgery. The charges might not lead to prison, but they certainly killed her credibility. Her wellness brand collapsed overnight when the court documents became public. It turns out people do not want life coaching from someone who tries to steal from a dead child. My parents tried to pivot. They sent letters. They sent intermediaries. My mother even tried to show up at the house again, but this time the new security gate I had installed did not open. I did not read the letters. I added them to a box in the garage marked simply, evidence. I finished the renovations on the Victorian house. The drywall is painted a soft, clean white. The floors are polished oak. And the downstairs parlor, the room where I had once sat in the dark listening to their lies, is now my studio. The light that pours in is clear and unobstructed. I took the $1.15 million and I did exactly what Noah would have wanted. I did not buy a retreat. I did not buy a luxury car. I established the Noah Sterling Grant. It is a dedicated fund that pays off medical debt for single parents with chronically ill children. Every month I get to sign checks that stop other mothers from having to choose between electricity and dialysis. It is not a manifestation. It is real help for real people paid for by the memory of a real boy. I was sitting on my front porch this morning drinking coffee watching the sun burn off the last of the fog. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat, the one I had silenced months ago but never left. Gary added Simon Krell to the conversation. Deborah, Maya, we need to discuss a settlement before trial. I looked at the screen. I felt that old tug, the muscle memory of obligation, the scapegoat's instinct to fix it. Then I looked at my garden. I looked at the piece I had built with my own 2 hands. I tapped the top of the screen. I scrolled past years of guilt trips, passive-aggressive comments and demands. I scrolled all the way to the bottom. I pressed the red button marked Leave Conversation. Delete and block. The screen went black. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. It was the sound of a foundation settling strong enough to hold up the rest of my life. I learned that sometimes you have to let the storm destroy the house so you can build a better one on the foundation. If you have ever had to rebuild after betrayal, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, what was the moment you finally said, enough?